we're going to start by painting the background. I'm not going to obey the background colours of the photographic reference. I'm going to make the scenery look a bit more wintry and a bit more chilly for this poor little blackbird. So I am planning to do the background colours more of a bluish greyish colour. So what we're going to do first, when you're ready, is I'd like you to please pick up some Payne's grey and some cerulean blue. For the background colour, we are not looking at a strong consistency. We're also going to, when we put the background colour, you'll see that we're going to be putting random patches of colour. So what we're aiming for, what I'm aiming for, which can be, is an odd sort of a patch of blue on one side, a bit more greyish on another side. So what I'm aiming for in the background is to just make it look, as I say, patchy and not a uniform flow of background colour. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up a little bit more cerulean. So it just gives me the, by having these two colours mixed on my plate, it just gives me the option to dab in and out of the other. So here's my two colours again. So this is the Payne's grey on this side, and this is the cerulean blue on this side. So I'm going to pick up a nice big soft mop brush, and I'm just going to swipe some water around, because we want all the colours in the background to be soft and muted. So I'm just flicking it around, okay, in a random fashion. Okay, there we go. So it's all wet. So it's shiny, but not absolute, you know, enough for it to be nice and wet, not running off the page. And then what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to tap in some colour. There we go. And then I'm going to change colour and put a bit over here. Right. Now I'm just going to get my brush and I'm just going to roll it around. So I'm almost diluting it again because I want it to be very patchy. I don't want it to be too even. Okay, so it's quite weak. Okay, it's really quite weak. And you can decide yourselves where you want these pale patches to be. It really doesn't matter. The main thing is to try and have what I'm aiming for. It's your personal preference as to what you would like. But for my personal preference, I fancy the idea of an uneven finish. So I'm aiming for a patchy finish. Okay. And you can either just soften little bits or just say, or just leave it and just let it spread itself. So I quite like that. So I'm not going to do much more. Just make sure the edges are nice and soft on the edges. So it all just fuses into nothingness. While that is settling and drying, I'm going to talk about how we're now going to move on, and we're going to start to paint the stems or the branches that we can see. And again, I'm going to be aiming for quite a cool finish. So we're looking for, again, for greyish tones. So here is my Payne's grey, and here is my cerulean blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that puddle there, and we're going to contaminate it and change it slightly. So what I'm going to do now is pick up some more brown. So this is burnt umber. And hopefully you can see it's immediately gone quite grey looking. Okay, so that's just burnt umber added to my Payne's grey, and it's gone really quite greyish looking. And then, depends on you really, you can either cool that down depending on your mood, because we're going to do little patches here and there. So I suppose we could go keep it slightly bluish looking. So if you add, I'm just going to pick up, so this is cerulean blue. Okay, so I've got another little patch here. So I've got a patch here that's very much sort of yellowy, true greyish colour. So that was the, remember, that's the burnt umber and the Payne's grey. And up here I've dragged a bit, and I've almost got my cerulean, contaminated cerulean blue, and it's looking bluish grey. I'm now picking up a tiny little bit of sap green. And again, I'm contaminating it with that mixture, which is again the Payne's grey and the burnt umber. So I now got some very muted tones. So this one's a bit more bluish. So this was the cerulean colour. This is the sap green, okay, but it's a soft green, okay. And then this is the Payne's grey here. I'll charge it up for you just to show it. So there's that really strong Payne's grey colour. There, look. Okay, and then I'm adding the burnt umber to it. Look, and it goes black, blackish. Okay, and we can just tweak that and add as much or as little brown as we want to manipulate it the way you want it. So got some strong areas and some weaker areas. Okay, so now I've got my colours. I'm going to go to my twig. And if you look at the photographic reference that I've got you, you'll see some of the twigs are in shadow and some of them are in light. So I'm going to emphasize that effect. So what that means is we are going to be glazing the area with water. So let's start at the top. So I'm just going to be putting some water down. And I'm filling the whole area of this branch pretty much with water. Okay, but I'm only going to introduce paint in the bottom of the twig. And what I mean by that is I'm going to do this. I'm going to tap it in there. And we're going to let it run. And then I'm going to do a bit there. And I think, oh, actually, I'm now going to add a bit of a slightly different colour. And I'm going to tap it in on here. Like that. And I might go a bit dark again. Okay. Now, if you wanted to have extra sort of running with the way that the branch is going to run, you could tip your board up if you wanted to, towards you, to keep the dark colour at the bottom. Okay, so what's going to happen in a few minutes, the watercolour is going to slowly filter or spread upwards into the wet area and give this sort of uneven finish that we want to keep these branches looking lively. And what I'm going to do while it's settling, I'm going to say, oh, well, actually, I want to make sure that that bit there looks really dark. Okay, so I'm just going to tap a little bit darker there, okay, and just leave it. There we go. So now that that's settling, we can move down to another section, and it can be pretty much anywhere. Let's go to this side because it's next one down. So again, I'm softening with water first. I want to keep this fairly cool looking. So I'm just tapping in patches, just a hint of colour. So I'm picking up a bit of that Payne's grey, perhaps picking up a little patch that's darker, perhaps picking up the odd little bit when I decide I want to. It's completely random. Decide, oh, actually, I want a little bit to look a bit more greenish, so I might add a tiny little tap with that sort of contaminated sap green. Okay, whatever, it doesn't really matter too much. The main thing is just to tap it, and again we're just aiming for a nice sort of patchy finish, and then I'm just dragging that out to the end. So now that this is settled here, we can do this one. So because this branch is lying in front of this one, I'm going to make sure that the top edge is a slightly different colour or slightly lighter, because we need to make sure that that definition between the two remains. So again, just little taps of colour. You want them, you can decide, you want to have your branches more brown looking or add a bit more green to yours, you can if you want to, but I am predominantly keeping mine sort of variations of sort of greyish, bluish greyish sort of tones. I'm just going around the berries and again just doing a tiny little tap, and then this one here. So again, if you just give it a very light softening with water first and then just tapping the colour, it can give a really nice effect. I mean, other variations of this are you really want to show it was even more heavy snow, you could deliberately paint a layer of white masking fluid on the top of your branches, put your glaze on and rub it off so it looks like, you know, very heavy snow on each of the individual branches if you wanted to. So that's an option for you to think about. So we've got a little bit here that's going behind. So this branch here, I want to push away from me. So I'm going to go quite dark with this one. Just tapping it in. And it's going slightly too greenish for my liking, so I'm just picking up a bit more Payne's grey. And because this is still wet, I can just give a little tap tap, because I want to make sure that looks dark there. That finish. Just softening my brush. And there we go. And I might just swipe up a little bit. There we go. I'm happier with that. That's a better finish. So again, wetting with water. And it really doesn't matter too much what specific colours you use. As I say, the main thing is think about the branches, think about ones that are going further away. So the branches that we want to recede and go further away, we probably want to make them look more cool and more blue and perhaps softer effects. Okay, so more muted looking and closer to the background colour. Okay, and that will make them recede. And the branches that we want to have in the foreground coming towards us, you could consider either warming them up, that's a trick of the trade that we would use, or we can make the lights and the dark stronger, make them more dominant, and that will help bring them forward. But the main thing is just to enjoy just tapping in little patches of colour, and then hopefully you'll go, oh yes, I like that. And if you don't panic. Remember how I showed you how you can immediately soften the effects. Okay. The main thing is to think about, so this colour here, that's sort of this greyish colour. If I want this branch to show up going this way, I need to make sure that that area stays light and perhaps is more of a bluey colour or a different colour. And that way, when you're crossing over the branches, they're not going to look flat. So while that's drying, I'm jumping across over to the right. And I'm just glazing this with water. This one behind the bird here. And I'm just going to start to tap in. And here you can just see how it starts to spread. It makes some really pretty patterns the way that it spreads. There we go. It's really nice the way that it mixes. So just keep it nice sort of bluish greyish colours, or as I say, or browns, anything that works for you. Okay, the main thing is just to have it, and then as it gets to the end, I'm just going to fizzle it out, and you can obviously go as big as you want to with your study. Okay, I'm just fizzling out the edges. So now that I've got that full, I'm now going to tap underneath. There we go. So there's another branch then. And while it's settling, that's looking a bit too uniform for my liking. So what I'm going to do, while that's settled, is I might just do a strong tap in there, and tap there, and then another little tap here, and one round there. That's better. Make it a bit more random looking. Yeah, just soften that edge on. Other things you can try. So if you find that this is filling in too much, let this settle. Get a clean, damp brush. Say, right, I want to lift out a little bit more on that bit, and I want to wipe that a bit more there. And wipe that a bit more there. There you go. Now you've got more evenness. So now I'm moving across to this side. I'm just picking up with some fresh water, and I'm now going to glaze this branch. And I'm just travelling down all the way to the bird, picking up a little bit more brown with this one, just to get the tones that I'm after. Right, oops, there we go. So let's just tap in some colour. Again, I'm going to be tapping at the bottom side of the branch only. So although I've glazed the entire branch with water, I'm only tapping the colour or wiping the colour in at the bottom, so that it spreads itself. So I'm very, very lightly touching the surface. And if I very, very lightly wipe that, there we go. That's just enough to bring that forward from the background. And yet we've still got some nice, interesting patterns and shapes going on in our branches. So this is looking a little bit too close in tonal value here. So to make that stand out, I'm going to have to do a little dark patch there. Hope you understand my reasoning for that, because that was looking exactly the same colour as the background colour. So I've given it a dark patch. There we go. And if I just, that's it, made it uneven. And where you've got these little intersections, if you can just do a little tap where you want it to be stronger, so it looks a bit more sort of all these sort of nodules and patterns things coming out on your branches. So there's quite a lot to do, and I hope you're finding it fun. So this is this long one along here. So I am now working down this one. And I'll probably stop here. So it's all glazed with water. And I've got my mix of colours here. And I'm just going to tap on the outside of this one in odd places. There we go. That's have a bit more again, and this one a bit darker. Here we go. Just going down to the berry. So you'll notice that the branch here that the blackbird is grasping is looking a bit stronger in colour. Okay, that's because we want it to stand out or come forward. Okay, so that's why that's a slightly stronger consistency, because I want to make sure that this branch is coming forward, that the blackbird is standing on. So here's another piece here. Again, always glazing with water first. So here are the feet. So these three here are the claws of the bird, because it's foreshortened. So at first glance you might think, oh, we've only got a one-legged blackbird. This is the one foot here, and these are the claws of its second leg just here. Add a little dark patch around here. As I say, it's entirely up to you whether it's more bluish, more greenish, brown tones, whatever colour you like, or colours that you like. Fairly randomly done, except for certain areas, I suppose, where you can think, well, actually, I need it to more dominant, so that's why I'm pulling this puddle down, or branch down. So now I'm getting quite down low. Glazing with my water, and let's just, oh yeah, let it run. There's loads of, as I say, you could tip your board up towards you to encourage the colour to run down to the bottom of the branches. And I don't think my work's already at slight angles. I don't think it's doing too badly. I might switch to a bit more brown actually. So let's put some water in that. And then let that settle a little bit. That's it. Okay, so we're now going across here. So I'm just pulling along all the time, seeing these lovely branches, and just dotting in some hints of colour. I'm going to let that dry a bit more here for this branch that's coming over. Just waiting for that to settle a little bit. So we're nearly getting there, I think. It'll be time to see how things are settling. So there's another section working across here. So if you notice here, I've deliberately left this light because I want to make sure that when you're looking at it, this comes forward and the other branch goes behind. So that's why that dark shadow there is really helping me. And if you decide, oh, I want to make the colour a bit darker somewhere, so let's say, for example, this bit here, I want to make darker around the blackbird. As long as I wash my brush out and immediately tickle the edges, just like I've shown you in the past, okay, I've now darkened that area without getting the harsh line that I've talked about in the past. So I'm now softening this. So here's the big branch here down at the bottom. I've got a few more to go. Start to do so. So just randomly tapping in spots of colour. So around here would be quite dark actually. So I'm just tapping in the colour, letting it spread, letting it do its job. Again, purely using my Payne's Grey and my burnt umber to get the tones that I want. Let's really emphasise that. There we go. A lot of nice dark crease in there. And just do some tapping, some dark there. There we go. So again, I can soften that just to give it a little light tiggle with some water, so it's looking nice and patchy. I'm rushing this a little bit, but obviously at your leisure, you could spend longer if you wanted to, spend more time working out how, you've got the patches or the colours of the twigs, whether you wanted some to look, which ones you want to come forward or back, or where you want them to go. So I'm now going to just going to blot the top with my brush. That's it. Now, to make this look more three-dimensional here, I need to tap some dark colour onto this side only. So I'm just mixing up my Payne's Grey and my burnt umber. So I've got that sort of browny grey branch colour. And I'm just going to touch the very edge of this branch. And it's going to do that lovely bit of running that I want it to do. Look at that. And I'm just going to flick this away, tickling away the water around here, because I haven't done that bit yet. If you wanted to get more suggestions of patches or textures on your branches and twigs, you could flick the odd bit. And you can also get more texture on it, like I've told you in the past, by using your chisel brush when the paint is dry, and you can get that comb effect that we've used in the past. Can you see I've done a few lines? I'll repeat this down here so you can see the effect that it does. So here we are, we're dropping the colour into the bottom, picking up a little bit more brown. There we go. So it's nice and dark in the bottom. And then if you want to suggest some more grains in your twigs, I'm now picking up my brush, and you could just sort of draw a few lines on it. And you can see you get some more texture going. And that bit's fizzling out, so I'm just going to fizzle that away. There we go. It's sort of disappeared into nothingness. So after today's lesson, if you want to spend more time, bringing out more details in some of them, you can. So I've just glazed this area with water. So I'm just going to put paint on the left-hand side only. I think, I'm going to change that slightly because I want to have this patchy finish. So I've now picked up a patch that's a bit more brownish. And then I'm going to drag it down here. So here I've got a line, so I need to soften that. There we go. And I'm just going to tickle that edge. Yeah, a little light tickle. And you could flick it there, look, and you get this nice, lovely, patchy, gnarly looking branch that we want. And again, this one is fizzling away into nothingness. So I'm just touching the bottom edge and just giving it a few little tap taps just to make sure that it's. So I want this one to come forward so we can make this a slightly warmer colour. It really doesn't matter too much. The main thing is to get a tonal difference. So we need to make sure that this one stays behind and the other one pops forward. So warmer colours come forward. Oh, hang on. It's such a tiny twig, you don't really need to. I'm still pre-wetting it a little bit because we want this nice runny effect, but it's such a tiny twig you don't have to do it, you can still do a little bit of tapping. And there's a little gnarly bit there. And then we've got this bit here, so let's just soften that. And we've got this bit down here, another gnarly bit, there it is. And just putting a little bit on the end here. Just soften. So there's a branch at the top here behind Mr. Blackbird. Oh yes, otherwise Mr. Blackbird's got nothing to hold on to. So we need to soften that in. And then what I'm going to do to make that more dramatic is I'm going to put some stronger dark colour. So again, going for my Payne's Grey, burnt umber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this dark on the underside or the lower side of the branch. So that means coming down here and wiping at the bottom edge, loading up a nice dark colour. There we go. And again, I'm making it patchy because I don't want this branch to look even. I want it to look patchy. We need to make sure that we represent this blackbird sitting on this heavy branch. So again, I'm going to tap in a bit stronger colour around here because I really want to show that it's dark here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just wiggle the edge of water. Okay, so we've got that highlighted edge. I'm just flicking, sharp flick with a clean damp brush, flicking it away, flicking it just like that. Flick. And then just wiggle that edge. Okay. So I'm going to have again cool tones. We might slightly warm it up, just because we can. Tapping colour in. Because the more you tap, we really want to encourage that mottled effect. I don't want to have a beautiful, smooth branch, twiggy shape. I want to have it patchy looking. So by tapping the colour in rather than trying to smoothly glaze the colour in, we're getting more of a random effect. And the main thing is not to overwork the twigs, I would say, or the branches, because it will let you tap in a bit of colour. So this at the moment is sort of settling. And because it's still wet, I can tap in a bit of colour just like this, look. And I can get a few random patches. Okay, a bit more randomness going on there. But if it's bone dry, it's more difficult. So the best thing when it's like that is to just wait a little bit, and then so here's one here we need to glaze, and we'll just make that fairly soft. So just think of these as being sort of a patchy wash, you know, a bit of colour, then a bit of highlight, and then a bit more colour again. Oh, I've just missed another bit of a branch there. Just noticed a bit of a twig there. And down to those berries. I'm just going to dot in a little bit there. Why not? Just to connect those berries up to this bit here. So now that I've done that, I can soften that in and perhaps think about making that a little bit darker there. So if I just, so I've already coloured this, but because I've just wetted it with a little bit of water, it's going to run again for me. Look, there we go. I've got a clean damp brush. I've tapped it on the kitchen paper, and I'm just wiping a little bit of it away, or just tickling the edge, just like we've done before, just to soften. Okay, just to soften. So the next step is what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to paint the berries. We want to encourage the berries to look three-dimensional. So have your photographic reference in front of you and think about how the light falls on your berries. So we're going to have a nice light cadmium orangey colour. So if you've got something like a cadmium red light, so a nice bright cadmium red colour, so I'm just putting a little bit of that on my plate. So there's my cadmium red light on the right hand side, which looks slightly orangey actually. And this is my normal cadmium red, any sort of berry sort of colour. So they're quite bright looking. And if you have a transparent red, like Scarlet Lake or something like that, you could even use that as well if you wanted to. Okay. But I'm using a cadmium colour. There we go. In some areas you want it to look a bit more, well, I suppose it's because of where the light's shining on the reference, it's almost looking salmon pink. So what we'll be doing is we'll be dragging the colour up into that area. So it'll be contaminated water. But just because I'm just gonna, just to the far right hand side, I've just picked up a tiny bit of cadmium yellow, just so that I have actually got a classic orange colour. So it's beginning to give me a range of colours. And then the other colour that I'm thinking of is that some of the berries I want to suggest that they are in shadow. So we are going to need to have a red that's a bit dull and a bit dark looking. So we can start to cool down our berry colour by adding some burnt umber to it. So here's my burnt umber, and here's my cadmium red. Okay, so I've now got a browny red colour. And then again, if I want to bring it down further, I've almost gone too much. You see how much, you don't need to have as much as that. Look, that's my Payne's grey again. And I'm going to bring that back up by picking up my cadmium colour because that was too much Payne's grey. So there you go. Now, there you go. So I've got a range of colours. You could also, even if you wanted to, perhaps even think of using something like alizarin. So we want to have that range. It just gives us a head start, so we can dot in some colours. So that's a little bit of alizarin being put into the mix there. So we've had cadmiums at the top, bringing up some burnt umber to make it a dirty red. Then I put in a little bit of Payne's grey, which was too much on my palette, so I added more red to mine. So we've got more of a sort of a brownish reddish colour. And then if you want to swing it the other way, as long as you've got a darkened tone, that's had a little bit of alizarin crimson added to it. So it just gives you a spectrum of your colours, because you really want to emphasise these nice looking shapes. Okay, we won't necessarily use all of them, but it's just to show you've got a range to give you a head start, so we can just tap in some colours. All right, so let's get started. And so what we're going to do is we're going to glaze a berry with water, like that. And then we're going to scoop up a cadmium red, and I am going to introduce the colour to the bottom area of the berry only. And just concentrate on getting a really nice edge to your berry. And I'm not painting in the top area of my berry. Now just rinsed out my brush, okay, and I'm just going to drag the edge up, just encouraging it to go up into the area. Now my brush is clean and damp and not dripping with water. I'm just going to soften that edge around there and just wipe around, just so that I've got a really nice edge to my berry. Just tickle and just wipe that edge around until I'm happy. I'm going to pick up the merest hint of cadmium red, and I'm just going to do very lightly, just around the edge of it. So I want to do just that little edge, just catching that little edge there. I'm trying not to get into the camera, hopefully not. Now I'm going to pick up that red again and reintroduce it to the bottom. So I really want to make it look strong in the bottom, and just a tiny little tickle. Okay. So I'm glazing the shape with water, and I'm going to pick up my cadmium red and I'm going to go across to that sort of burnt umbery purpley dark colour. Okay, so you want it to look dark, and I'm going to drop it into the bottom of the shape of my berry shape. Just concentrate on getting a nice berry shape, and if you've got a little bit of a wiggle, don't worry, just make the berries a bit bigger. So there it is spreading. So now I'm picking up some red. Look, no, it's looking, and now I'm wiping some red into it, and I'm just wiping some red. So now it's got that little red blush, but the berry looks as though it's in shadow because we've made it a dark colour. Really want to bring that redness out. I'm just again going to the bottom area of the berry only, because it's all wet. I can just really tap that red, dark red colour in, just to make it look dark. Rinse it out, and now, just like I did with the other one, I'm just going to just drag across very, very lightly. So my My water's not too wet. Look, there we go. Just to give it that shine. So now I'm going to jump down here while these two berries are drying. Just tibble that edge up. Don't think you can see that. There is colour in the top of it. It's not brilliant white. It is a contaminated area of colour. Okay, it's not pure white at the top there. So down here, let's glaze this one with water. And let's pick up a nice red. If you want your berries to look brighter, sometimes you can add a little bit of opera rose to your red if you really want to bring out some pinkness of it, or slightly change the colour. So I suppose it'd probably make it a little bit more like Scarlet Lake then. The main thing is, because you want the, just as we did with one of our Christmas card designs, we had the berries all slightly different colours. So I'm trying to repeat that process here. So I've got my clean brush. I've wiped it so that on a cloth, and I can just drag that paint up, just pulling it around in that existing colour. There we go. So I'm getting that sort of halo effect. So all the time, every time you want to paint your berry, glaze it first with water, and then drop whatever colour it is in you want first. And because you've pre-wetted it with water, it will spread in the area that you've wetted, and you'll get a soft halo or a soft effect. So you don't need to panic too much. It's not huge amounts of paint. Now I've got a slightly messy edge there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe that. There we go. And it's gone. And I'll see how that settles. So I won't come back to soften that. So it is possible to get away with it. So let's come down here to the berries that are behind our blackbird. And I'm just dropping in some water. Now they're not touching, so I don't need to worry too much. And obviously we can have as few or as many berries as we want. So because these are in the distance, all of these berries are looking fairly pale. All soft in colour. Let's go over to this side here. So I'm just going to wet this one. So as long as you spend your time glazing the shape with water first, so you get that nice little sheen that we've talked about in the past. Nice and round. There we go. And now I'm just tapping in my colour in the bottom. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of red. And I'm just going to encourage that to go up. I'm just teasing it round. And there we go. Teasing it around. Wipe a little bit on the top. I just want to make sure that's not too dark. There we go. Jumping down, jumping away. Glazing a new circle of colour with water. Or new berry with water, something. Glazed with water. So we've got that little sheen, picking up our nice, rich berry colour. Introducing that to the bottom edge only. So that bottom edge is nice and sharp and nice and heavy loaded, that lovely dark colour that you want. Oops, if you do a little wiggle, just like you did that one, we're just going to make that bit just a smidge bigger. There we go. And then we're just going to drag that edge up. And we're just going to wipe it away, just very slowly. Just tidy that edge now. And we'll just make sure that that's nicely tapped full of colour. And just if you just want to soften it, just give me a little light wiggle. A little light tickle. There we go. So that nice soft over. Right, let's go do this one. So glazed it with water, so be careful not to rush it. And make sure you give it a really nice circular shape. Tap in that dark colour in the bottom. You want it to, you could make something a bit more blackish actually. Let's make this one a bit more blackish. A darker tone into it. There we go. Now I need to pick up that red, otherwise I'm going to make a dead berry. Okay. Picking up that red. Loading it into that berry. Making sure with a really nice circular shape. And we're going to pull, just drag that up. Just encouraging it to just flick it up and spread into that shape. So the colour of the berries doesn't really matter too much. I'm sort of looking at the photographic reference that we had. The main thing that I am trying to do is to keep the dark colour at the bottom of the sphere shape. And so we've just got that soft highlight at the top. That's my main goal. The colours in the background, or the berries in the background, the ones that you want to recede, have the colours more muted or perhaps paler. And the berries that you want to look more dominant or more eye-catching have stronger colours in. Okay, so these ones are showing up much stronger because we've got that nice strong dark dominant colour in the bottom. Okay, so this one here I'm making quite a cold berry colour, so it's looking quite easy markings. I'm now flicking back to my classic red, and I'm wiping down into it, so it's not, there we go, I'm flicking down so it's keeping that strong colour in the bottom. And when I want to pull it up around the top, I'm going to get rid of this paint that's on my brush, lifting it out, I'm tapping it on my kitchen paper, and I'm just easing or dragging these what's already on my page, just dragging it over into that area. Okay, so now I've got that colour the way that I want it to go. I'm just pulling it round. Okay, and then I'm just leaving it. Okay. So to make this one go behind this one, we again need the colour to be a dark red and perhaps a little bit cooler. You see how this one looks as though it's going further away or further in the distance or behind it. So we're going to need to have dark shadow again in the underneath, and perhaps a slightly different red, slightly cooler perhaps, just to make sure that it goes behind. Okay, so on my plate I'm going to mix up or pick up some alizarin crimson, which I will be adding to my cadmium red. And what I might do is the merest speck on standby of my Payne's grey. So I'm now adding a tiniest hint Payne's grey. Hang on, I'll pick the plate up. So this colour here is alizarin crimson with a little bit of Payne's grey added to it. So it's a dirty alizarin crimson. Okay, so it's sort of going aubergine, maroony colour. Okay, and there's my bright red over there. Okay, and then in case we need to put in a speck of darkness even more, that's a little bit of stronger mix of Payne's grey on the end here, which is almost looking purpley. Here is the berry, which we need to make sure sits behind this one. So just as before with all the others, let's give this a careful glaze with water. Okay, happy with that. And now I'm going to pick up that alizarin crimson colour and I'm tapping it in the bottom area. And then I'm going to scoop up some cadmium red. Okay. And then I'm going to go up against the very next to it. I'm just making sure it's all tapping in that area. Rinsing out my brush. I need to just tweak that shape a little bit. There we go. And now I'm just going to wipe the edge and flip that up and add a tiny little bit of cadmium to it. There we go. Just wipe that with a halo, just like that. And there we go. And then what you can do if you wanted to is just going to tap this corner here very, very lightly. Hopefully my head's not in the camera. Just tapping that corner just to make sure that it doesn't go in. There we go. Scoop up my top. So again, colour always tapping in the bottom of your shape, picking up your brighter colour, tapping down into the darkness, or the dark area, or the dark colours. Damp brush, and I'm just dragging, I'm just teasing that colour up into the shape above. Just tap in so we can tap a bit more darkness in there and just pick up some colour. I'm just very gently tapping it in the bottom here, just to encourage it to be dark at the bottom. So for our blackbird, we will need to be mixing a blue and a brown. Those of you know, I don't use black paint for blackbirds. I find that black paint kills, flattens, deadens colour. So if you look at the photo that I supplied you with, you will see where the blackbird catches the light on his neck and shoulder or the top edge of his wing. It almost looks like a night bluish colour. So what I'm going to be doing is mixing up really strong dark colours. So let's pick up some burnt umber and work your brush on your hard can if you've got a hard colour. So you've got a really buttery, strong zone or puddle of colour, so you cannot see through your paint. We need this colour really dark. So that is burnt umber. That's looking quite buttery and thick. Can't see through the plate, so I know that this is a strong colour. And then I'm going to pick up some French ultramarine, just so you can see it. There you go. And I'm also going to return back to my old friend Payne's Grey, which you could use an alternative if you want to. There it is. Look how strong and lovely and dark I'm getting that colour now. Look. There we go. So I've got a bluish black colour, and it's so strong and dark I can't see through my plate. We're going to have it dark here, slightly bluish here, dark here, and then we're going to have, perhaps it's entirely up to you, we could have it slightly more bluish here, but what we need to do is have a very subtle tonal difference here. We want to underline the bird's wing coming down, and then this area is really, really black. So what we can do is, while it's drying, just as we did with the berries, we can start to dot in or introduce some colour into the bird, because we want it to be really, really thick, really, really heavy, really, really dark. Okay. So this is my puddle look. It's looking black. This one looks, with the brown, it's looking really proper sort of blackish. Over here it's looking a bit more bluish. I'm now picking up a bigger brush. So I've now gone up to a number 6. So where I was doing the berries, I was using a number 4 brush. I've now picked up my larger brush. Okay. So I am going to pick up my water, and I am going to glaze my blackbird with water, avoiding the eye. We'll worry about the eye afterwards, okay? So do not paint over the eye, paint around the eye. Okay, so I'm now pulling this water down, and I'm just very carefully taking my time, bringing in the water, pulling it down, okay, pulling it down here, there's the tail there. Okay. Don't forget there's a little gap there, going around the berry. Picking up some more water. So this gives us a head start, and it takes a bit of the panic out of painting the blackbird if we pre-wet it with water. Okay, we could even leave the tail to the end if you wanted to, and we can just do this bit together. Okay, let's scoop up this really super strong dark colour. And we're going to start at the top of the bird. And I'm just dragging it down to the beak. And it spend time getting a nice edge. Okay. Okay, and now very lightly beginning to fill in that bird. Really want this to be as dark as I can. Okay, you want to make it even bluish, you can if you want to, whatever. It's really lovely and dark. Okay, now I can start to do some bigger sweeps and drag it down. Okay. I'm just pulling it down. Pulling it down. So at the edge here, I want to make sure top edge is minutely lighter. Just dragging it down. And there is my branch going around the berry. Pulling it down. But down here we want it quite strong, so I'm going to pick up some more paint now. I'm trying to scoop up more paint. Really want it really, really dark, so I'm really trying hard now. Really, let's get this really, really dark. Okay. Just really make sure that there's lots of lovely dark paint in here. And I'm just dotting it down where my blackbird is. Really, so you can flood up. So up here, we want it to be really dark. So I'm scooping up more paint now. Scooping it up and going back up to the breast there of the bird. And going to the edge. Okay, and then I'm stopping where the neck comes. So I'm going to stop about there. And I'm going to tap in a bit more under the beak. Under it and into his throat. And I'm going to tap a bit more colour because it's still wet at the top of his head, above his eye, and drag it down to his beak. And just tickle that in. And then this is nearly dry, it's nearly too late, but I'm just going to do a little line under his wing. There. Just like that. And I'm going to leave him alone now. So it's really, really dark. There we go. And I can just tickle a few little taps here. So it does want a little bit of texture in there. But it's really, really dark now. Dark as you possibly can. And because this is all wet, this is why I'm getting away with tapping in lots of colour into it, because it hasn't settled yet. It's still that glossy, shiny puddle. So it's letting me get away with it. Okay, this where it's drying, this is where it's getting a bit dangerous now. When the shine or the sheen starts to disappear in your watercolour, like on the top of the wing here, and light there, okay, that's when you don't want to touch it. If it's too light, just let it get absolutely bone dry, and we can put a top layer on it, okay? Better for it to be too light than too dark. This, because this area is all soft and glossy and still a shiny puddle, that's why I've got away with tweaking in, or even you see, look, this is still wet. I can even add a little bit more colour in now, and I know that this colour is going to settle and is not going to look nasty and horrible. Okay, so if you've got severe patchiness, just let it get bone dry, and then you can put another layer on. But once it's semi, so this is a semi-dried area, so these bits here are wet, this is wet, this is drying, okay? I mustn't touch that, otherwise I'm going to spoil it. Okay, so picking up my water so that we can place the rest of the wing there, and then we need to go in here against the berries with water. And around the berries again. I'm just making sure I've got that head start with water that takes the panic out of it a bit. Head start with water. Make sure I've just got my head start. There we go. Let's scoop up some colour. So that's a small area, so I'm going to use a small brush, and the wing gets darker as it gets to the edge. So I'm just pulling that colour in. Just pulling that down. So again, it's just that Payne's grey or French ultramarine with that umber. Just to tap in as much darkness as you can. Okay. The wing. Okay. Now let's go into the tail. So because we've pre-wetted it with water, it's just given us a little bit of a head start in taking the panic, hopefully taking the panic out of it for you. Dragging it down, filling in that shape. For our blackbird. Till we're happy with it, just tidy up the edges. You could just tease the edges of it, I suppose, if you wanted to. Right, there we go. So now we've got the colour loaded on. I think it goes just to there. There is our lovely blackbird. So under the wing, or the tail, is looking really dark behind that berry. So I'm probably going to pick up a bit of this ultramarine blue and Payne's grey and try and load in another layer of colour while it's still settling. Really get that saturated and looking so unbelievably dark. So this is the second layer going into the glaze straight away. I'm trying to make this blackbird so super dark. Okay. And then I've made a slight mistake there. That should be branch. just wiping, so this is a clean damp brush, dry brush. And I'm just wiping that black out of that area to get my branch back. Wipe it away. There we go. If I just do that, there we go. Getting it back now. Beautiful. So there we are. So we've got it. So it's beginning to settle and dry nicely now. Hopefully, we're finding. So we've got this halo around here, which we wanted to show the wing, and a bit around the neck, and show the darkness around the throat, and then really, really dark in the tail. Okay. So we're going to need to let that dry for a while. Let's do the Blackbird's Eye. So for that, we are going to be using our black paint, the same colour that we use for the feathers. We are going to go down using a tiny brush, or whatever brush you've got that's got a really nice point to it. Okay, so I've still got my number 4 here. It should be small enough. And what we're going to do is we're going to adopt exactly the same principle as we have for the berries. But we don't really need to re-wet it. I'll do it for you, so I think you'll find it easy to get a halo this way. But because it's a tiny one, I'll probably just do a little dot at the top of water, because we want it to be really dark at the bottom. Okay. And let's paint in the bottom. And I'm just tapping in a really, really strong colour at the bottom of the eye only. I haven't painted the top because there's a little bit of light catching the blackbird's eye, and we really want to keep that. So I don't want to lose that, just that slight lightness to the top. Okay, so I'm watching it, really, really trying really hard. Loads and loads of strong paint in the bottom of the blackbird's eye, and then do a very tiny, go very slightly around the edge until you're at sort of 12 o'clock and stop. Now you can see that I've left a little bit of highlight around the top. So at 1 o'clock, as I say, it's got like this little wipe out of it, and so we want to make sure we've got a little bit of highlight. Okay. Just not a little line across it, with just that little bit of light catching that eye. Now while that is drying, and we've, as I say, we can start to paint the beak, but I've actually got to take my blue beak, haven't I? So there is my beak, and we need a nice golden yellow beak. We've got a very slight tinge of orange at the base, at the lower beak, and it's looking more of a lemon yellow at the top. You're going to need a cool lemon yellow. You're also going to need a colour that's a cadmium yellow. Let's get stuck into this little beak. I might just rush and change my water. My water's a bit dirty. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to change my water. As you can see, it's left a bluish greyish tinge to my beak. Okay, I've got my clean water. Let's tap in some colour at the bottom. And so it's very, very almost at the top of the beak. It's quite yellowish, and it's almost looking white in a photographic reference. So this colour that I'm putting on is quite sheer. it's very weak. Herbal tea, very, very weak colours, not much at all. And then I'm just mixing a little bit of my cadmium yellow with a little bit of the cadmium red, so you sort of get that orangey hint to it. And I'm just going to introduce it. So I'm painting on dry at the moment, just to flick it down. Hello, I'm just finishing off our Blackbird painting for you. So my next step is what I'm working on now is the eye and the beak. So I am going to get my rubber and just lift off the halo around the eye and a bit around the beak, just to make sure it's all nice and clean. The eye around the yellow around the eye is too big. If you look at the photographic reference that I gave you, and so what we need to do is to make the black area slightly larger. So in order to do this, we need to get a really fine small brush. So I'm going to be using the same mixture that we used to paint the bird itself, which is the burnt umber and Payne's grey ultramarine mix. So I've loaded up my brush. It's really small. This is a number 3. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint around the eye. There we are. So just pulling that out, pulling it out, working around. I'm just pulling it, just dragging it out, just to make the eye a little bit larger. Looking at our reference. I'm just coming around the back here. There we go. We've kept that halo at the top. So that's much neater around the eye now. And the colour is orange or cadmium. So I'll get a small brush and I'll go to our nice cadmium yellow colour. And because it looks more like a pumpkin orange, I'm just going to add a little bit of cadmium red to make an orange. Or if you've got Windsor orange or a nice strong orange colour, you can use that as an alternative. I might have a little bit of speck of Windsor yellow, so it's not too, it's got that hint of brightness into it. And there we go. So I'm picking up a small brush. I've got a mixture of Windsor yellow with some cadmium, and I'm going to paint over the white with a nice golden yellow colour for the Blackbird's eye. And then using the same colour, I'm now going to put some more information in on the beak. So we're going to have a line across here, like that. And then we're going to just do a very light little wash, just to drag a little bit of colour in. There we go. And then, because we want the beak to show up, I'm just going to have the top beak just slightly lighter, so it's going to be more the merest hint of Windsor yellow on the top, just to keep it nice and bright. So I am very gently blushing on a little bit of colour straight onto the dry surface, just to give that a little bit of colour. There we go. So that's looking like a much happier blackbird. So I'll wait for that to settle, and then I might touch up a little bit more on the beak. But for now, let's go around here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give that a tiny little bit of more colour around here, because when I rub that up, that's not really going to show. So I think I'll give a tiny little bit more shadow in there. So how we do that, if you do want to do a bit more touching up, is we pick up a little bit of the cerulean, and as I say, we've already got the Payne's grey colour on the go. So if you remember when we did the background, what we did was we pre-wetted with water. So if I want to tweak this background a bit more, if I just wet a little patch here where I want to add a bit more colour, okay, so I've pre-wetted it, and then I'm just going to tap a bit of colour. There you go, just tap. And then because I want it to look chilly and frosty and cold, I'm picking up the cerulean blue, if you remember. Okay, and I'm just dotting it in there. Rinsing my brush out, tapping it on my flannel or cling film, kitchen paper. Okay, just to give it a bit more colour, and if I want to just put a bit more of a cool tap in there. And there we go. Just to soften that edge so it looks nice and patchy, which is what we were aiming for. Remember, I'm just blending that away. There we go. Now I've got a patch. I might leave that one around there, so I'm quite happy with that. Anywhere else where I think I want to introduce a bit more colour, perhaps up here, because otherwise these spots here, which will be snow, won't show up. So if I will glaze this first with water and then tap on a little bit of this cerulean blue and just give a little sweep. Okay, now I've got my clean damp brush and I'm just softening that away, and again around this side, just softening it away. There we go, blended it away. So now I need to decide where else do I want to have, so I might bring a little bit of that out. Yeah, I'm going to lose some snow here if I don't put a bit of blue around here. So again, just do a little tiny little wipe with my cerulean, and so that I don't get any harsh edges, I just wiggle or roll the edges away. There we go. So I won't get any harsh lines. Right, so the next thing that I'm going to do now is to paint some more berries. So just as we did before, I am now going to return to my number 4 brush, pre-wet the area that I want to paint or glaze it with water. I'm then going to pick up my berry colour, and I'm just going to tap it into the bottom of my sphere shape. There we go. And then I'm going to pick up a slightly lighter colour and I'm going to bring that in higher up. And then I'm rinsing out my brush and I'm just going to tickle it in that edge and drag that up. There we go. Now I've got a little, very slight rough edge on that berry. So if you've got that, just tidy it up by pulling that shape out. Just the merest smidge. There we are. Disappeared. Problem disappeared. Okay. So this one here. Glazing with water first. Picking up my colour. Pulling it down to the bottom. So I'm happy with the shape that I've got. Because I want this berry to sit behind, it's a slightly darker colour. And then I'm going for my lighter colour now. And I'm just blushing it across into the dark area. Okay. Very, very lightly touching it. There we go. And then I'm going to make this one a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to do a slight on that one. And then this edge here needs tidying up. So I'm going to get my rubber and rub that out. And I'm just going to soften that with a little wash. So if I just get my mixture of my umber and my Payne's grey, I'm just going to make this twig a little bit wider, just along here. So I'm just tapping a bit in there. And again, I'm just like I did with all the previous twigs, I'm making it uneven. Just to bring that edge into there. Picking up a bit of an umber, and I'm just going to flick a bit like that. And then this needs to come up into that area there. There we go. That's looking better. So just a little bit of touching up required. Just to show that there's that crease. And then I'm just going to do a few little specks here. And then I think what we will do is flick that up. And then we'll do another little dark bit there. And then we're going to need to soften that. So I'm just using a clean damp brush and just wiggling that away slightly. Just so you can see that breaking off. And then round here needs to be a bit stronger. So again, I'm just going to do a tiny little bit of touching up just to give it a little bit more. And then we will be just about there. Move that away. And then we're going to need to do a little bit of touching up there. Soften that. Right, I think we are there now. So here's my rubber. And I'm just emphasising the snow flurries. Just using a HB pencil just to make sure that there's a few little dots around. Right, now let's do the feet. So this is going to be using a diluted mix of Payne's grey. So I'm just going to glaze first with water, just to give me a bit of a head start. So I'm just picking up my Payne's grey, and I'm just going to probably drop in a little bit of ultramarine blue or French ultramarine into it, actually, just to emphasise that blueness that I've got. So I'm just stroking it down and just pulling it and tapping it in. Because we don't want it to be too smooth. And then we need it to flick this way and down this way. So this is where the claws are going. So I'm just tapping this around the front here. And then we've got one going behind. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a blue wash there. Yep. So this one is going this way. That one is going that way behind. And it comes to a nice claw at the bottom. I'm just swiping up. And I'm just doing a slight colouring in. There we go. So I'm pulling this round here. So there's the other claw there. Which is just catching the light. And we've got this claw here, pulling up to this claw there, and we've got this one here, pulling up. And this is the claw that's peeping around the other side of the branch. So I'm just hooking that around like that. And then just to make sure it's nice and dark in that area here. So I need to give this a little tickle. And we need to give this a little tickle here. So just the... So I'm going to need to do a dark underline of the branch, otherwise visually this isn't going to make sense. So what we've got here is we've got this coming down, down, down and down like that. So what I'm going to have to do is pull that up there, pull it out there and go up. And then I'm going to tibble this shape and push them up into there. And now the claw makes sense because it's behind the branch. So I just need to make a little bit more definition around the foot. So I need to make this bit darker here, this bit coming down around here, connecting to the claw, and I need to show that this bit here is connecting to this claw. Okay. I'll do another little bit there. There we go, that will help it. That's coming out around there. And then this one here needs to move further back. So I'm going to make this one darker. So just like we did before, I'm going to add some water to the side, and I'm just going to tap in just a bit more around here. just to give it a bit more oomph, just so that it makes sense. There we go, that's better. Just to tap it in, just to give it a bit more life. And then let's do a patchiness there, and perhaps a bit there, just to make sure that it's not too uniform. Just watch that. Drag it. Just to make sure that it's the way that you want it. Great. So now I've got the other foot up here, which is just a few little claws. Again, it's this Payne's grey with a little bit of French ultramarine added to it, just to connect these three claws here. Just giving it a little wash, just to get rid of that white, just to show that we can represent claws here. There we go. I'm going to go slightly brighter blue, or cover a slight little bit of blue. So it's French ultramarine with the Payne's grey. So it's a bluish greyish colour that I'm after. And I'm just going to tap the colour in on the edge there. And just have it like this. There is the other claw there. And then the last one at the bottom. Just tapping this one in here. There you are, hope you enjoyed that. So the only other things that I could probably do is, if you wanted to do any more touching up to it, I could probably put a bit more colouring around the wing, and there's a few strands or suggestions for the berries. You could leave them as pencil, or put in a bit of some fine lines if you want to, or even use your watercolour pencils to suggest them. Alright, so thanks very much for joining me.